Welcome, dear viewers, to Family Secrets Unveiled. What I'm about to share with you today isn't just a story. It's a chilling tapestry woven from premonitions and parental dread, a true account that will challenge everything you think you know about intuition, about fate, and about the fragile veil between our mundane reality and something far more sinister. There are whispers in the quiet corners of the world, tales of uncanny foresight, but few are as stark, as heart-wrenching, or as tragically precise as the one I've meticulously pieced together for you. It begins, as many profound mysteries do, with something deceptively innocent, something as pure and unburdened as a child's imagination. But beneath the vibrant strokes of crayon and the joyful scrawls of a developing mind lay a darkness, a prescient horror that would haunt a mother's waking thoughts and plunge her into an abyss of despair. Meet Sarah Miller, a name that evokes a sense of normalcy, a woman whose life, just a few short years ago, was a portrait of quiet suburban bliss. She was a kindergarten teacher, her days filled with the infectious laughter and boundless energy of 5-year-olds. Her evenings, though, were reserved for her own bundle of joy, her son, 8-year-old Ethan. Ethan was, in every conceivable way, a bright, imaginative boy with a spirit as effervescent as the summer breeze. He loved superheroes, building towering Lego castles, and most of all, drawing. His bedroom walls were a gallery of his burgeoning talent, adorned with fantastical creatures, brave knights, and spaceships soaring through alien galaxies. Sarah cherished these drawings, carefully cataloging them in a dusty art box, each one a testament to his vibrant inner world. Her husband, David, a kind-hearted architect, shared her adoration for their son, often boasting about Ethan's artistic prowess to anyone who would listen. They were, by all accounts, a picture-perfect family living in a charming 2-story house nestled in a tree-lined cul-de-sac in the heart of suburban Ohio. Their lives were predictable, comfortable, and filled with the gentle rhythm of family life. They had dreams, simple yet profound, watching Ethan grow, celebrating anniversaries, growing old together, their hands intertwined. But fate, as it often does, harbored a cruel joke, a macabre twist waiting in the wings to shatter their idyllic existence into a million irreparable pieces. The first hint of this impending darkness wasn't a sudden storm or a cryptic warning, but a subtle shift, a barely perceptible tremor in the fabric of their everyday. It began with Ethan's drawings. Initially, Sarah dismissed them as a phase, a temporary fascination with more serious themes. His usual vibrant palette gave way to muted tones, and the whimsical subjects were replaced by scenes that, upon closer inspection, were unsettlingly specific. One Tuesday morning, as Sarah prepared breakfast, Ethan bounded into the kitchen, a crumpled piece of paper clutched in his hand. "Mommy, look," he exclaimed, holding up a drawing. It depicted a familiar street corner, just 3 blocks from their home, rendered in hurried, almost frantic lines. What caught Sarah's eye, however, wasn't the familiar lamppost or the sprawling oak tree, but the overturned red car, its wheels spinning uselessly in the air, and 2 small, stick-figure people lying motionless on the asphalt. A larger figure, drawn in what appeared to be police uniform, stood over them, a look of anguish on its face. Sarah's heart gave a strange lurch. "What's this, sweetie?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "It's a bad accident, Mommy," Ethan replied, his young voice devoid of emotion. "It's going to happen today, after school." Sarah chuckled, a nervous sound that barely masked her unease. "Silly boy," she said, ruffling his hair. "That's just your imagination running wild." She tucked the drawing onto the fridge with a magnet, dismissing it as a childish fantasy. Later that afternoon, as Sarah drove to pick Ethan up from school, the radio blared an urgent news bulletin. A tragic car accident had occurred just minutes earlier at the intersection of Maple and Elm, precisely the corner depicted in Ethan's drawing. A red sedan, driven by a young couple, had veered off the road after colliding with a delivery truck, resulting in fatal injuries. A police officer was on the scene, overseeing the grim aftermath. A cold dread seeped into Sarah's bones. She pulled over, her hands trembling on the steering wheel, the details from the news report echoing with an eerie familiarity. The red car, the two victims, the police officer. It was all there, just as Ethan had drawn it. A coincidence, she told herself, a deeply disturbing one, but a coincidence nonetheless. How could a child, innocent and sheltered, possibly predict such a horrific event with such terrifying accuracy? She tried to rationalize it, to find any logical explanation, but her mind spun with a chilling realization. This wasn't imagination. This was something else entirely. As she drove the remaining distance to school, a seed of fear, cold and insidious, began to germinate in the fertile ground of her maternal instinct. This was merely the first brushstroke in a macabre masterpiece, a grim prelude to a symphony of sorrows that would soon consume her entire world. Little did she know, this wasn't the end of the strange occurrences, but merely the ominous opening act, a curtain rising on a tragedy that would unfold with relentless precision, guided by the innocent hand of her own son. The incident with the red car should have been a wake-up call, a blaring siren in the quiet life Sarah had built, but denial is a potent anesthetic, especially when the truth is too terrifying to face. Sarah, a woman of logic and reason, clung desperately to the idea of coincidence. She forced herself to believe Ethan had somehow seen the accident earlier, perhaps on a fleeting news crawl or overheard a conversation, his young mind simply processing and recreating it. She wanted to believe that, needed to believe that, because the alternative, the notion that her beloved son held a terrifying gift of prescience, was a darkness she couldn't bear to look at directly. But the universe rarely grants such convenient illusions for long. The drawings, however, kept coming, their chilling clarity escalating from mere predictions to outright warnings. 2 weeks after the car crash, Ethan presented a new piece of art. This one was larger, more detailed, and utterly devastating. It showed the old Miller and Sons factory downtown, an abandoned, crumbling structure engulfed in bright orange and crimson flames. But the detail that made Sarah's blood run cold was the small, distinct figure drawn in the foreground, a man with David's unmistakable thinning hair and broad shoulders, standing perilously close to the raging inferno. David, Sarah's kind-hearted architect husband, was currently overseeing a renovation project for a new client, a project that required him to survey and secure a number of old, structurally compromised buildings downtown, including, ironically, the Miller and Sons factory. When Sarah saw the drawing, she felt a wave of icy panic wash over her. It wasn't just a fire. The drawing showed a section of the roof collapsing, a dark, heavy mass descending directly onto the man's figure. That evening, a tense silence hung over the Miller dinner table. Sarah nervously buttered a piece of bread, her gaze fixed on David. "Honey," she began, trying to sound casual, "how's the Miller and Sons project going? Is it safe?" David, sensing her unusual anxiety, smiled reassuringly. "It's fine, Sarah. Just old. A lot of structural integrity issues. That's why I have to be so careful. I'm scheduled to go back in tomorrow morning to check the main load-bearing walls before the demolition crew comes in." Sarah's internal alarm bells went off, deafeningly loud. Tomorrow morning. The fire. The collapse. She couldn't tell him about the drawing. How could she? He'd think she was losing her mind, or worse, he'd be angry for letting a child's fantasy dictate their lives. But she couldn't not warn him. "David, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking slightly, "I have a terrible feeling. Please, reschedule that trip. Or at least, please, promise me you won't go near those old walls." David's smile faded, replaced by concern. "Sarah, what is this really about? You've been jumpy lately." She faltered, unable to speak the impossible truth. She settled for a vague, emotional plea. "It's just a mother's intuition, David. Please, for my sake. Just skip tomorrow." He reluctantly agreed, his gaze filled with a mixture of love and confusion. The next day, as David worked from home, Sarah was glued to the local news feed online. At 11:17 a.m., a breaking news headline appeared. "Massive blaze rips through abandoned Miller and Sons factory. Structure collapse reported." Her stomach dropped. It was happening. But David was safe, sitting just 2 rooms away, reviewing blueprints. A wave of profound, exhausted relief washed over her, quickly followed by a terrifying realization: Ethan's drawings were not random. They were not coincidences. They were a timeline. They were the future. The revelation hit her not as a frantic scream, but as a cold, hard certainty that settled deep in her core. She knew she had to investigate this. That evening, after Ethan was tucked into bed, Sarah cautiously approached him. "Ethan," she whispered, sitting on the edge of his bed, "tell Mommy about your drawings. Where do you get the ideas?" Ethan looked up, his innocent, wide blue eyes staring past her, as if looking into another dimension. "I don't get ideas, Mommy," he said softly, his voice barely audible. "I just draw what I see." "And what do you see, sweetheart?" Sarah pressed, her heart pounding. Ethan paused, then pointed vaguely at the corner of the room, into the darkness. "I see the shadows show me," he murmured. "They show me the sad things that will happen." The word shadows sent a visceral shiver down Sarah's spine. The next day, desperate, she began her own secret investigation, starting with the old box of Ethan's drawings. As she sifted through them, looking for any previous patterns she might have missed, she stumbled upon a drawing from 6 months ago, a drawing she had completely forgotten. It depicted David, standing in front of a familiar sign, the logo of his architectural firm, shaking hands with a tall, imposing man with an unusual, sharply pointed beard. But the crucial detail was that the drawing showed a small, dark object changing hands, a thick, unmarked envelope. Below the drawing, Ethan had scrawled a single, cryptic word in his developing handwriting: lie. A profound sense of unease settled over her. David was a good man, honest and loving. But for the past year, he had been working relentlessly on one major, lucrative project for a single, new client, a man named Mr. Elias Thorne, a notoriously shadowy property developer known for his cutthroat business practices and unusual appearance. Sarah suddenly recalled seeing Elias Thorne once at David's office Christmas party, tall, imposing, with that distinctly pointed beard. The drawing didn't predict a tragedy, it suggested a secret, a betrayal perhaps connected to the very client who funded their comfortable life. Ethan's prophetic sight, it seemed, wasn't just about random disaster, it was intimately, terrifyingly connected to the people closest to him, perhaps even intertwined with a dark secret David was desperately trying to keep buried. And the drawing of the factory fire, now re-examined, took on a sinister new meaning. Was it a tragedy averted by Sarah's warning, or was it a tragedy meant to happen, one that David was somehow meant to witness or even cause? The connection between the money, the secret, and the foretold tragedy began to form a chilling, inescapable web around their family. She held the 2 drawings, the handshake and the fire, a knot of suspicion tightening in her stomach. If Ethan's drawings showed tomorrow's tragedies, then the deepest tragedy of all might not be an accident, but a calculated act, a secret that threatened to destroy not just their lives, but their very souls. She needed to know what was in that envelope, and she needed to know before Ethan's innocent hand drew the next, and perhaps final, devastating prophecy. The clock was ticking, and the shadows were watching. Sarah's world had narrowed to a single, suffocating point: the truth concealed within David's secret project and the terrifying prescience of her son. The cold, hard fact was that David was lying. His evasiveness, his sudden defensiveness whenever the name Elias Thorne was mentioned, the vague nature of his surveys at derelict buildings, it all clicked into place, illuminated by a child's drawing and scrawled with the word lie. The idyllic portrait of their family was a counterfeit, painted over a foundation of deceit. Sarah knew she couldn't confront him directly yet. The stakes were too high, the potential tragedy too great, and the information she held, a child's psychic drawings, was too fragile and unbelievable to be her only weapon. She needed concrete proof, something that would force David to face the darkness he had invited into their lives. She found her opportunity that Saturday morning. David was out for an early, unusually secretive meeting, claiming it was urgent work with Thorne's legal team. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, Sarah moved with a frantic, cold precision. She knew David kept a locked safe tucked away behind a false electrical panel in his study, a hidden space he'd once jokingly called his box of grown-up secrets. Using the spare key she'd found months ago in an old watch box, a discovery she'd then dismissed as unnecessary clutter, she quickly opened the safe. Inside, she expected to find financial documents, perhaps evidence of embezzlement or a shady contract. What she found was infinitely worse, infinitely more shocking. There was the thick, unmarked manila envelope from Ethan's drawing. Her hands trembling, Sarah tore it open. It didn't contain money or blueprints. It contained meticulously documented evidence, a series of photographs, reports, and a non-disclosure agreement. The photographs were of the victims of the red car crash from 3 weeks ago, the young couple, vibrant and alive, pictured just days before their death. The accompanying police report confirmed the details. The crash was officially ruled an accident due to brake failure. But the attached reports, internal memos from Thorne's engineering firm, told a horrifyingly different story. The reports detailed a flaw in a specific model of brake line, an intentional defect designed to save production costs, a defect that David, as a consultant hired by Thorne, had been explicitly tasked with certifying as safe in exchange for a massive, life-changing payout, the lie, money from the handshake drawing. The initial draft of the report, still nestled in the envelope, had David's notes in the margin, expressing profound moral objection and demanding the company recall the part. But the final, signed report, the one that went to the Department of Transportation, bore David's clean signature, vouching for the safety of the flawed brake lines. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. David hadn't just taken a bribe. He had knowingly signed off on a defect that led to the deaths of 2 innocent people. The drawing of the red car wasn't a prediction of a random tragedy. It was the prophecy of a consequence, a direct result of his moral compromise. But the most chilling item in the safe was a third drawing, a hidden, frantic scribble on the back of the non-disclosure agreement, clearly drawn by Ethan in a moment of panic. It was a crude, terrifying portrait of Sarah herself. She was standing on the edge of the second-floor landing of their own home, her hands clutching the railing, her face a mask of fear, and a dark, large shape, the shadows Ethan spoke of looming directly behind her, poised to strike. Below it, scrawled in an almost illegible hand, was the date, tonight. The realization slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. The factory fire was averted because she intervened, because she saw the warning. But David's secret, his monstrous deal with Thorne, was still active. Thorne wouldn't just let the secret go. And now, David had an insurmountable reason to silence her. She knew the truth. David's early meeting with the legal team wasn't about work. It was about damage control, about securing his position. And the final drawing wasn't a prediction of a disaster outside their home, but one waiting inside, a danger so intimate and terrifying it could only come from someone she trusted implicitly. The shadow in the drawing wasn't just a metaphor for danger. It was the shadow of betrayal, the presence of David himself, driven to desperation. Sarah frantically raced up the stairs. She had to get Ethan. She had to leave. But as she reached the top of the stairs, the sound of the garage door rumbling open froze her in place. David was home. Early. He hadn't gone to the legal meeting after all. He had been watching the house, waiting. The moment of confrontation had arrived, but with the chilling knowledge that he might no longer be the kind, loving man she married, but a desperate accomplice to murder. She shoved the documents back into the safe and slammed the door shut just as David walked into the study, his face unreadable, devoid of the usual warmth. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat, dangerously calm, "you're home." "I thought I heard a noise upstairs." His eyes flickered towards the electrical panel, then back to her. He knew. Their eyes met, and in that silent, agonizing moment, the facade of their perfect life shattered. The loving husband was gone, replaced by a terrified man trapped in a web of his own making, a man who saw his freedom, his future, and his entire life balanced precariously on Sarah's silence. The climax had arrived, not in a burst of fire or a screaming car crash, But in the terrifying quiet of their own home, right on the second-floor landing, precisely where Ethan's final, harrowing prophecy was set to unfold, the shadows were closing in. The air on the second-floor landing was thick, suffocating, charged with the volatile energy of years of deceit suddenly exposed. Sarah stood frozen, her back to the railing, the drawing's horrifying image of her inevitable fate playing in a loop in her mind. David was only a few feet away, standing near the study door, blocking her path to Ethan's room. His face, usually open and kind, was a mask of cold desperation. The realization that the man she had loved was not just a liar, but complicit in murder, was a pain sharper than any physical threat. "The safe," David said, his voice a low, rough whisper that was far more terrifying than a shout. "You opened it. You know." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, confirming the end of their life together and the immediate danger she was in. Sarah forced herself to breathe, to find the strength the mother in her demanded. She looked past his desperation, aiming for the last shred of the man she knew. "The Millers," she whispered, her voice trembling, but steadying with righteous anger. "Two innocent people, David. Because of a signature. Because of a choice you made for a payout." It was just a certification, he spat out, his control finally cracking. A single, isolated incident. Elias Thorne, he threatened everything, Sarah. Our house, our security, Ethan's college fund. He said he'd ruin me, professionally and financially, if I didn't comply. It was a one-time thing. I was going to fix it. I was going to find a way. And the fire? The factory that burned down today. Sarah interjected, pressing her advantage, her eyes never leaving his. Was that going to be another isolated incident? Was that your desperate attempt to destroy the evidence against Thorne? Or against yourself? The accusation landed like a physical blow. David stumbled back a step, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pure horror. "No, Sarah, that was going to be the end of it. I was going to find a way to make it right." "You can't make death right, David," Sarah said, the full weight of the truth crushing her. "And you were never going to stop. Not when Elias Thorne owns you. And now you're looking at me, your wife, and seeing an obstacle. The shadows Ethan draws, they're not demons, David. They're just you, when you let the darkness in." That last sentence pierced through his frantic self-justification. For a fleeting, agonizing second, the kind David, the loving father, resurfaced. His eyes filled with genuine, heartbreaking pain. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he pleaded, reaching out a hand, "especially not you. Please, Sarah, just forget what you saw. We can leave. We can disappear. For Ethan. We can start over." It was the ultimate betrayal, a plea to sacrifice morality for survival. Sarah shook her head slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I can't. And Ethan knows. He drew the car crash. He drew the factory fire. He drew this moment, David." The mention of Ethan's knowledge sealed his fate, transforming his pain back into desperate terror. He lunged. Not with a weapon, but with the panicked, wild force of a trapped animal, aiming to silence her, to prevent her from reaching a phone, to keep her from telling the world. The force of his desperate grab sent them both reeling, crashing against the wooden railing. The old, ornate banister, weakened by time and the sudden, violent impact, splintered with a sickening crack. Sarah screamed, not in pain, but in the terrifying confirmation of the drawing. As the railing gave way, sending a shower of wood splinters across the floor, the two bodies tumbled forward. But in a final, purely instinctual act of maternal protection, Sarah twisted in midair, using her body as a shield. David, desperate to save himself, grabbed hold of her, not as a partner, but as an anchor. They hit the floor below with a gruesome, echoing thud. Sarah awoke to the chaotic sounds of sirens and Ethan's soft, fearful crying. She was on the floor, dazed, her leg broken at a horrific angle, but alive. David lay a few feet away, motionless, his neck at an unnatural angle, the true shadow finally claiming him. The police, alerted by a panicked 911 call Sarah had managed to initiate by knocking the phone off the wall and screaming before David lunged, were swarming the house. In the days that followed, the truth about David's deal with Elias Thorne was revealed. The documents Sarah had found were the key. Thorne was arrested. David's role in the cover-up and the accidental but fatal confrontation were plastered across every news outlet. Sarah, recovering in the hospital, held her son tight, feeling an unbearable mix of grief, profound relief, and deep, aching emptiness. Ethan's drawings stopped completely after that night. When Sarah finally brought him home, the art box remained untouched. When she asked him why he wasn't drawing anymore, he simply looked at her, his eyes clear but sad. "The shadows are gone, Mommy," he said. "They only come when someone is keeping a bad secret." The family portrait was shattered, the suburban bliss irrevocably tainted. Sarah and Ethan survived, but they carried the scars of the tragic foresight that had both saved and destroyed their family. They moved away, seeking a fresh start where the shadows of their past could not follow. Sarah realized that Ethan's gift was not a curse meant to cause tragedy, but a desperate alarm, a final chance to avert an even greater moral catastrophe. The true horror wasn't in the seeing of the tragedy, but in the terrible, human choices that brought it into existence. The story of Sarah and Ethan Miller is a haunting reminder that the deepest secrets often lie not in the outside world, but within the walls of our own homes, guarded by the people we trust the most. And sometimes, the most innocent hands are the only ones capable of sketching the dark future we are too blind to see. What terrifying secrets are lurking just beneath the surface of the lives we think we know? You may never look at a child's drawing the same way again. Thank you for tuning into this chilling true story on Family Secrets Unveiled. If this story gripped you, if it made you question the reality around you, please give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next harrowing secret we bring to light. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, not all walls hide secrets, but sometimes the shadows do.